On behalf of ORSAM, I would like to warmly welcome you to today's panel titled The Horn of Africa at the Center of Global Strategies and Current Dynamics. We are delighted to have you here with us at the Green Park Hotel in Ankara. To begin, we have the honor of hearing opening remarks from our distinguished guests. First, I would like to invite Dr. Kadir Temiz, President of ORSAM, to deliver his opening remarks. Please let's welcome him.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I have a structured, speech, but before this, I want to welcome all of you in a really difficult and very sensitive moment of the world politics, economy, and maybe social and cultural situation. For now, we will not only discuss actually African politics, economy, but also we will talk today our future, and especially together with Türkiye and Turkey's new position and active diplomacy in the continent. So our guests, you are also welcome, and I appreciate your effective participation and active participation to this event organized by ORSAM. I personally, since almost 1 year as president of ORSAM, try to contribute to these studies of Kaan Devecioğlu, our coordinator. I also thanks to him for their efforts to bring, African continent to Turkey's agenda, and not only academic, but also, public and politic. So, on behalf of ORSAM, I welcome all of you to the panel titled The Horn of Africa in Global Strategies, Current Dynamics and Regional Outlook. As you know, the Horn of Africa has become a geostrategic hub, not only for the African countries, but also for geopolitics and economics in the world. With its vital ports, energy resources, maritime trade routes, and its complex security challenges, the region stands at the very intersection of global power projections. Actually, this unique position of the continent, of course, renders the Horn both a hotspot for geopolitical rivalry and platform for emerging cooperation and regional integration. And in this case, of course, Türkiye trying to push this as from diplomatic, political way, and government and civil society organization, all of us trying to push this moment. In recent years, Türkiye's growing interest in Horn of Africa reflects a multi-layered strategic vision rooted in both humanitarian engagement and regional diplomacy. What began in Somalia as a humanitarian commitment has evolved into long-term security cooperation, energy agreements, and investment partnership. Actually, this is a kind of Türkiye model. And this model trying to shape both Türkiye and the region. Of course, there are multiple options and multiple models discussed in recent maybe centuries for African region. But for the first time, maybe since centuries, a kind of cultural and friendship between Turkey and African nations created a new momentum, and Turkey trying to push this as well. Turkey's mediation efforts in Ethiopia, for example, and its constructive role in Sudan's peace process, and expanding economic engagement through Djibouti demonstrate its aspiration to be a stable, autonomous, and enduring actor in the region, guided by the principle of strategic autonomy. And this is an important concept. Maybe Turkey's new diplomacy trying to provide for the region, and not only Africa, but also Middle East and other part of the world. This strategic autonomy provides good amount of, opportunities for civil society and academics and universities and of course, public institutions. At ORSAM, we believe that functional diplomacy, and I sometimes define our job as non-official diplomacy, as think tank, of course, grounded in a data-driven analysis, field research that Khan made several times in Africa region, and strategic knowledge. Of course, this is completely different from the academic knowledge. And academic, the Elam Hoca is here in Ankara, social science universities, efforts to bring regional, academic orientation to Turkey. I totally respect this endeavor. But at the end of the day, strategic knowledge, I mean the conjectural and the tomorrow's events and the political necessities and needs in the region necessitates, I think, a kind of strategic knowledge and strategic perspective, which only ORSAM and related, think tanks can provide. Like Tunç is here also from SETA, and he also brings really important strategic perspective, and Tunç here. To African studies in Turkey. So through today's panel, we aim to provide a genuine and original platform for scholarly dialogue, bringing together respected experts from Somalia to Ethiopia, from Kenya to Turkey, to explore the region's current challenges, emerging opportunities, and possible future scenarios. We are confident that the perspectives emerging from this discussion will enrich not only the academic literature, but also Turkey's multidimensional engagement with the region. As global tensions, in the United Nations General Assembly today, we are discussing a lot of hot topics, but Africa region is also one of them. And we were talking with the Khan Hoca, before we start this speech. And for the first time, I think, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan mentioned Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and what's happening in Congo now in the region. And now a Turkish president now declared and made it, clear in the United Nations General Assembly. So that's also important indication of Turkey's, engagement and new position for the region. So as global tensions persist, as I told before, we are convinced that the diplomacy, negotiation, and shared positive agenda, that's an important point actually, because we are sharing some positive agendas. And generally we are discussing in Africa, and even I'm saying this for the Middle East, and we have negative agendas a lot, from conflicts to the war, but now we have positive agendas, and we have to push this. So what is this? And maybe we have to discuss in this, panel. But this positive agenda remain our most powerful tools to overcome conflict and crisis. And thank you very much. And let me take this opportunity to express my gratitude to all speakers and participants. And I wish you a productive, inspiring, and forward-looking panel. I also thanks to our ORSAM team for providing this panel for us together. Okay, welcome again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Temiz. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Hakkı Uygur, Vice President of the Turkish National Intelligence Academy. Please let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, dear guests. I would like to begin by extending my warmest greetings to all of you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today as this distinguished panel organized by ORSAM. The Horn of Africa, as President Kadir Orsam mentioned, is one of the most critical regions in global politics in terms of its geopolitical and strategic importance. This region, which has increasingly attracted the attention of global powers, also holds a special place in Turkey's foreign policy vision. Extending from the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean, the energy routes, trade corridors, and security architecture render of the Horn of Africa a decisive geography, not only at the regional level, but also globally. In recent years, Turkey has developed multi-phased relations with the countries of the Horn of Africa, spanning from Somalia to Ethiopia and from Sudan to Djibouti. Turkey's security assistance and the Turkcell military training base in Somalia, the Ankara process initiated with Ethiopia, contributions to peace and stability efforts in Sudan, and the commercial and diplomatic outreach in Djibouti all demonstrate Turkey's steadfast commitment to the region. As the National Intelligence Academy, we greatly value platforms such as these, where ideas can contribute not only to academic literature, again, as Kadir emphasized, but also to policymaking processes. Understanding the dynamics of such a complex geography as the Horn of Africa, accurately assessing its multidimensional security challenges, and evaluating its opportunities from a strategic perspective are of vital importance for Turkey's role at global level. I sincerely hope that this event will provide new momentum to Turkey's cooperation with the countries of the Horn of Africa. I would like to express my gratitude to ORSAM for organizing this distinguished event, and I wish our discussions will be fruitful and enlightening. I greet you all with the utmost respect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uygur. Thank you to both of our speakers for their insightful words. Now we move to the main part of our program, which is the discussion panel. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Kaan Devecioğlu from ORSAM Türkiye, who will lead today's discussion. And we are privileged to have with us an excellent group of panelists, which I'll introduce now. Professor Abdulwahab Sheikh Abdisamed from Afro-Asia Institute for Strategic Studies, Somalia. Dr. Gizacho Asrat from Institute of Foreign Affairs, affiliated with the Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ethiopia. Dr. Cliff Omondi Okwani from the University of Nairobi, Kenya. And Professor Dr. Elem Eriçe Tepecikluoğlu from Ankara Social Sciences University, Türkiye. Each of them brings valuable insights and perspectives on the Horn of Africa and its global dynamics. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Kaan Devecioğlu, our moderator, to the stage.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our panel. I would like to invite our panelists, first of all, Professor Abdulwahab Sheikh Mohammed. Please. Okay. In there. No, Professor. Professor. and Gizachev Asrat from Ethiopia Institute of Foreign Affairs, and Clifford Okwani from Kenya, University of Nairobi. Welcome. And lastly, Professor Dr. Elem Eğrice Tepeciklioğlu as well. Yeah. Okay. Welcome again. The Horn of Africa has long been at the crossroads of global trade, security challenges, and geopolitical rivalries. Today, the region continues to draw attention of major powers such as United States, and GCC actors, Türkiye, and others. Whether through security cooperation, economic engagement, infrastructure developments, or maritime strategies in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. We are honored to have distinguished speakers from Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Türkiye, each of whom will share their insights on how global and regional actors are shaping the future of Horn of Africa. And also after the presentations, we will have almost 20 minutes question and answer session with the audience. Okay. So let me start with our distinguished Somali speaker, Professor Abdul Wahab Sheikh. Somalia is right at the center of Horn of Africa, and not only because of the challenge of terrorism and maritime security, but also due to the energy exploration efforts. At the same time, the debate over Somaliland's unilateral declaration of independence and possible recognition by Western actors has gained attention recently. So, to kick off our discussion, I would like to ask, considering the threats from groups like Al-Shabaab and Daesh, how does the Somali state try to balance its security and economic interests in dealing with global and regional actors? The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kirtokan. It's a great honor and privilege, at least to speak today at this event. Before I start the role of the global actors in the Horn of Africa, specifically in Somalia and Somaliland, let me give you a brief history, or brief, less than 5 minutes, the Somaliland and Somalia issues. Somaliland, in the 1st July of 1960, the British Somaliland and Italian Somaliland united and formed Somali Republic. In 1991, Somaliland declared independent state from rest of Somalia, but none of the international community recognized them, basically for 3 issues. Issue number 1 is they lack consent of the parental state. Parental state, which means Federal Republic of Government. The successive government of Somalia refused to recognize Somaliland as an independent state. Unlike other states like Eritrea or Sudan. South Sudan, when they were independent from the rest of Sudan, the parent state of Sudan give them green light to go ahead. Similar to Ethiopia, when the Eritrea became independent, then they seek the consent of the parental state, which is Ethiopia, and they allow them to proceed. Unlike the Somaliland itself, because the parent state, which is a federal government of Somalia, refused to proceed their successions. Mainly, if you look at African Union Charter of 1963, it's almost impossible to allow them to proceed without consent of the parental state. In Africa today, there is 33 active members. There's 33 active tribal groups which they are looking for succession. So if the African Union allow them to proceed, I think they are going to open a Pandora box. 2 of them or 3 of them active succession group, they're in Ethiopia. I think my brother here, he knows very well. So that Pandora box, they don't want in fact to open it. The second issue is a great power patronage. They don't have a great power who can push for them to become an independent state. So unlike Kosovo or Hong Kong, but none of the great powers are willing to push the regulation of Somaliland. That's also another obstacle for regulation. The third one is the internal division itself. Somaliland, as we speak right now, internally, there's a fragmentation internally, because recently, 2 months ago, there's a creation of the northeast state of Somalia, which is part and parcel of the federal government member states, which means 45% the total landmass of Somaliland is gone. Secondly, further north, the same Somaliland further north, and other state also they are pro-unionist. In other words, the 5 major clans in Somaliland, 4 of them are pro-unionist. So the issue of what they call succession, it's almost illusion rather than reality. The third issue is, which I'm going to add, the role of the global actors in Somali conflict as well. If you look at, let's analyze one by one. The US. What's the interest of the US in Horn of Africa? The US, for the last 34 years, Somalia collapsed. They never done a tangible, development in Somalia. Apart, they're focusing on only 3 issues. First, maritime security. Secondly, humanitarian aid. Thirdly, what they call counterterrorism issues. So give me one single development agenda they have done in Horn of Africa, specifically Ethiopia, Somalia, and Djibouti. Nothing, none. Just focusing on the 3 issues. Let's come the issue of the European Union. The same. European Union, they are there, provide humanitarian aid, maybe to some extent, maybe training small security issues. The other issue I forget to add the American presence in Horn of Africa is, they have a lot of, bases, military bases in Horn of Africa, in Djibouti, in Somalia, in Kenya as well. Normally, if you look at it, is interest of Americans, they're pushing the interest of Americans rather than what they call the equal partnership. The European Union, the same. They have been there. They are pushing what they call humanitarian aid and few other things. The other issue is the role of Gulf states. I will come the issue of Turkey. But before I come to the issue of Turkey, let me talk also the role of the Gulf states in Somalia. Specifically, we have to focus the issue of the UAE, the destructive role of the UAE in Horn of Africa. Unless we address the elephant in the room, we cannot and will not have a peaceful coexistence in Horn of Africa. And it's a fact. UAE, the interest of the UAE is they have to see fragmented, fragile, and weak Somalia. As we speak right now, they are in control of Somaliland, Puntland, and Jubaland. They are training a parallel security forces. So when your security forces been trained by different entities, that means stability of that country is far from over. The other issue, the issue of what you call the ports. The EU, they're going to control the ports on Horn of Africa, specifically the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. Start from the port of Sudan all the way to the Dar es Salaam. What we call a buy and kill. Buy and kill. You can buy the port and then kill them, so that the Jebel Ali is the booming port. The other issue is the destructive fall is training parallel, proxy forces. That's exactly what they're doing right now in Sudan. RSF. Before the war started in RSF, almost 80% of the local fighters of RSF was Sudanese. As the war progressed, everybody has gone back to the ethnicity he came from. Then what they did? They recruited mercenaries from neighboring states, from Central African Republic, from South Sudan, from Somalia, from Chad, from Libya, to some extent even from Ethiopia, to undermine the essence of Sudan itself. So when you have a global actor which is destructive in North Africa, we will never expect any stability at all. We have to address it the way it is as an academic. The other issue, in fact, I'm going to add the role of Türkiye in Horn of Africa. Let's start in Ethiopia. Türkiye invested in Ethiopia more than $2.5 billion. The second investment provider after China. Textile industries, and also a lot of investment. They create a lot of jobs. In Somalia, in 2011, Somalia was in desperate situation, had no friends globally, until the Prime Minister Erdogan came to Somalia and rescued Somalia and put Somalia back to the global map. It's a fact. Secondly, Turkey became a largest humanitarian provider in Somalia at that time. They established one of the biggest military academy in Horn of Africa. They trained Somali security apparatus, Somali security agencies. When you train the Somali security agencies, means they are going to stabilize the country itself. And that's a step forward. That's the kind of the development people of Horn of Africa are expecting from the partners. The other issue is they engage education sector. They establish schools. They give a scholarship to Somali students. More than 5,000 Somalis today are in the, in the University of Turkey today. They transform Somalia into modern state. Unlike the European Union, unlike the US, unlike even the Arab world, to say the fact. Despite we share the same culture, But unfortunately, it's a very unfortunate. The other issue they engage is health sector, health system, security and defense, energy and natural resources, humanitarian development, education and scholarship, and diplomacy and mediation. Turkey, they succeeded to mediate between Somalia and Ethiopia. They really reduced the tension up to now. The tension between Somalia and Ethiopia is no longer exist anymore now. They're really, it's what we call a honest broker. We are expecting similar to do the Somalia and Somaliland. Somaliland now they reach the what do you call the ripe stage. It's the right time today, right now, we are going to mediate them. So that's the global actors or Horn of Africa as we speak right now. What the people of Africa expect from global actors is an equal partnership. Not exploitation, not undermining the stability, not training different security apparatus. If they don't have one curriculum, some of the soldiers trained by the UA, others trained by the Ethiopia, others trained by the United States of America, others trained by the British, that itself undermines the stability of the nation. So Somali security apparatus train a single friendly state. That's Turkey. That's Turkey. We don't want anything else to train our security apparatus. We don't want anything to invite to do the dirty business in our country. That's one issue. The issue of ISIS and Al-Shabaab also, we have to address. Academically speaking, 45% of the foot soldiers of the Al-Shabaab, they are not Somalis. Somalis is no longer, Al-Shabaab is no longer what they call Somali business anymore. 45% of the foot soldiers, they came from neighboring states, from Kenya, from Somalia, from Ethiopia, from even Tanzania, as far as Mozambique. And this is a reality. We have to face the reality itself. Again, the issue of ISIS. How they came to Somalia is $1 million question. Where they came from? They came through the oceans, or my neighbors? Nobody knows. We have seen one morning there is almost 1,000 fighters in the Puntland state of Somalia. There's ISIS there. How they came with different nationalities. Also, we have to study who is behind such kind of things. So that's about the situation of Horn of Africa as we speak right now, from Sudan to Ethiopia, all the way to Somalia. This is the situation now we are in. And the world is drastically changing. The world we know 10 years ago is not, because there is no, humanitarian law, there is no, international law. Law is broken in the Gaza war. So this is a time now the African scholars, African intellectuals, they go back to the drawing board and assess who is the real partner. Who is our real partner? Who is assisting us? If we don't do that, if we don't do that, then we'll be left behind the drastically change of the global today. So if you have any other questions, or maybe I'm ready to answer those questions, I really appreciate and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, okay. Thank you very much, Professor Abdul Wahab, for those valuable insights about Somalia, specifically Somalia to Horn of Africa. Turning now to Ethiopia, which is another key player in the Horn. And we see a country that carries significant regional weight, but also faces both internal and external pressures. So I would like to three main questions. Firstly, how do global actors such as China, European Union, and Gulf states, these are engaged with Ethiopia's search for alternative sea access, you know? And secondly, do you think Ethiopia's growing partnerships with emerging powers like BRICS members, and BRICS members change the balance of influence in the Horn? Lastly, Ethiopia was removed from AGOA by United States, during the Tigray War, as I remember. And although it hasn't been reinstated, the pace of talks has increased in the recent months. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on this matter, actually. Please, floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Khan. All protocols are observed. Thank you, officials and attendants, participants, respected Turkish citizens. It's my first time in Turkey, in Ankara. So I travel many and across Europe. So I'm very happy to see that this status of ancient civilized status have some similarity and characteristics of shared ancient civilized status, which we know history gives for us, and our fathers and grandmothers give for us, and I'm very happy for that. So all the speech which I made is not unofficial. I mean, I'm representing a think tank, so it's affiliated to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's my perspectives. Coming to my reflection on Ethiopia's relationship with China, EU, Gulf status is very important that currently the Horn of Africa is facing. As the President says, it is a strategical autonomy that we believe, and I also understand that the Horn of Africa needs a strategical autonomy, which should be a shift from strategical constraints to strategical autonomy that Ethiopia also envisioned to have now, which is related to sea access. And like Antonio Gramsci said, the old world system is dying, and the new world system is trying to born. I mean, struggle to born, is trying to struggle to fight to born, and that time is a time of monasters, or it's a time of anarchy, which everyone is competing to survive, to struggle. So I have seen that the globe at the system is, in that perspective, the global system. And that reflects in the Horn of Africa. And we are a part of it, that we Ethiopians are a part of that struggle. That's why we also joined the BRICS as a part of the new struggles in the new world system. So I don't know exactly each country's understanding and perspective about Ethiopia's strategic quest to access to the sea. But I understand that Ethiopia, at official, at public and intellectual level, Ethiopia needs access to the sea. And that access to the sea quest is getting some tension within the Horn of Africa, within neighbor countries. As a result of that, a relationship with European countries, a relationship with Gulf countries, a relationship with China, even Turkey, have been determined, and some of the political discussions are around on the Ethiopia's access to the quest and that's consequences to the regional stability and the regional issues that they give us a priority by those different states in the Horn of Africa who have an investment, a big investment, big interests in terms of economy, in terms of politics also. Not only Horn of Africa, we cannot see about only in an area for competition only for resources. It's sometimes have also ideological and other interests there in the Horn of Africa. Either inside and outside actors are struggling to the Horn of Africa. So I see some of the countries are looking from their own grand strategies. I mean, like China was associating the Taiwan issue with Somaliland issue. They aligned with the grand strategy, with their one China policy. So that's my perspective. The European unions have also the same issue when it comes to Spain or Catalan, Barcelona, and an issue. I met some person in Budapest before 3 months. There is a conference which maybe Turkey was against that conference actually. The Indian Middle East European Economic Corridor, which affects the Turkey's economy ambition in the region or any whatever it is, because there is one of the discussion in that topic there. So in that case, I met some people around, and I asked one of the Italian guy, when you talk about the issue of Somaliland and Somalia, in the European Union meeting, you have to write the minutes of the Spanish representative in advance before going to the meeting, because they always reject. So there is no collective understanding or anonymity within the European Union, but there are some unilateral issues of these Somaliland, Somalia access to the sea issues. When it comes to US, also USA or United States of America, they have an issue or concern regarding to Somalia. They invested on security aspect only. They are interested on only security and Al-Shabaab and Daesh. They have such a big ambition or interest for economic investments, because that's maybe too costly for them, maybe. Maybe there is, now Trump may have a shift because of his transactional foreign policy on minerals and resources, but they also see this from their grand strategy of stability with business. I mean, they consider that stability in the region is very important. At the same time, business is good for, stability is good for business. So they link that the issue of this, if there is a destabilizing factor, they are cautious about that, but they totally accept the Ethiopian access to the sea. Definitely all actors, despite how Ethiopia wants to get access to the sea, they have an agreed interest. I mean, they have an agreed understanding that Ethiopia needs access to the sea, but they differ in how to get access to the sea. That's my understanding. We have a discussion. They all accepted that Ethiopia should have to get access to the sea. Should not be landlocked because it's more than 130 million population. It's a big economy in the Horn of Africa, and it's a very large country in the Horn of Africa, and it has an historical rights and other factors. So they accept that Ethiopia should be strategically autonomous than strategically constrained status. But the way how it can be handled is an issue for those powers, and great power for Americans, for Chinese, even for Turkey, and the Gulf states. Yeah, there are issues in the Gulf states. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, Professor talks about UAE, so I will not go to UAE. I prefer to talk about Saudi Arabia. It's because they are the major actors, not only UAE. We have to talk about, when we talk about Gulf state in the Horn of Africa, we have to talk about UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel too, because they are very important actors. Sometimes I have seen, I hear some discussions about dominantly in the Horn of Africa, geopolitics about UAEs. UAEs as a spoiler state. That's a dominant narrative what I hear. They may have some issues regarding the Horn of Africa, but sometimes those countries, they sometimes cooperate when it comes to Gulf countries. Sometimes they oppose when they come to the Horn of Africa. So they have a different foreign policy tools. Saudi and UAE is cooperating in Yemen, but they are against when it comes to the Horn of Africa in Sudan. So we have to see why they are different when they come to the Horn of Africa, what are their interests, and why, and how the Horn of Africa should have to respond. That's how the Horn of Africa should have to be cautious. And when it comes to Israel, there is also an issue of Houthi, Red Sea, and an issue, which is at the alliance and interest of Israel is determined, is based on your position to Houthis, to the Red Sea and others, rather than really other interests. So when it comes to Saudi, you have to see about Saudi as a protocol state in the Gulf countries. And that protocol nature of state should go to the Horn of Africa. They want to make it happen in the Horn of Africa. So that when it comes to that, they contradict in the Horn of Africa with the UAE, because the UAE have more transactional foreign policy tools, and they engaged as a kind of have an imperialist status on us. They are searching for minerals, port developments, and investment, huge investment. So the Ethiopian relationship with UAE is very good, as far as I know. They invested too much. They cooperate with the state, as Turkey also invested too much in Ethiopia. You know, next to China, as I agreed with professors, Turkey is one of the highest, investor countries in Ethiopia had. So the third will be India. So we are not much on investment. We are more partner with an emerging countries rather than the traditional status of US, European countries. So they are found in the second layers of investment that the Europeans and other countries. So these are the dynamic that we have to see about the Horn of Africa in terms of Ethiopia. But what is the most important thing that Ethiopia is really needs this access to the sea from survival, prosperity, and regional stability too, because Ethiopia as a state have contributed for regional stability despite its internal issues. When it comes to BRICS, we define BRICS, or Ethiopia define BRICS, that's as an alternative financial sources. That's very clear. We have a concern, it's very clear and open that the current global order is not good for developing countries, and Ethiopia also advocating that publicly. And we have much more trade partnership, whether we like or not, bilateral trading partnership with those BRICS member countries, except Brazil. But we have with China, with India, with Russia, those including military cooperations. We have a good relationship in bilaterally. So joining to the BRICS gives a platform for Ethiopia to have an alternative routes to international finance, which we tested in ground in reality when we start building our dam, or the greater Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. We got some blacklists and or suffocation from all traditional global institutions. That is one of the tastes that Ethiopia has had in previously. So we need to have some alternative source of finance, which is free from political budgets, though it may not be free, because there is no such free world. There is no such moral institutions at the global level, despite the attempts. So that is how we define BRICS, and we join BRICS for an alternative tools and partnership rather than alliance. It's not an alliance. It's not a creation of a new alliance. Rather, it's a creation of an alternative or an additional partners at the global financial competition, aid, and other, because we see from that perspective. So the Horn of Africa is like that. We have to see from this dimension of competition and cooperation. But what's the most important, the Horn of Africa states by themselves are lacking some cohesion and collective and understanding of the global dynamics. The Horn themselves, the Horn of Africa states themselves, they have a misunderstanding, misinterpretation of the global dynamics, what's happening there. That means that the understanding of Ethiopian, the understanding of Eritrea, the understanding of Kenya, the understanding of Sudan, Somalia are not the same about the changing global dynamics. If they understand well and if they come together, they can use the opportunity that the current global dynamics brings to them, rather than getting tension and division. So what is the most important in the Horn of Africa is we have to know that we have this isolation. There is no more isolation period for the Horn of Africa. There is a shift from isolation to global competition, what we have seen in the Horn of Africa. So how we use those competition for the benefits of the Horn of Africa state in partnership with those states who have an interest in the Horn of Africa is very critical discussion in the Horn of Africa. That's my point. Thank you.
Yeah, really, thank you for sharing that perspectives on Ethiopia, Dr. Gizachev. Let us now move to Kenya, Dr. Cliff. Kenya plays a bridging role between East and the Horn, and often acts as a diplomatic and economic connector in the region. So I would like to two main questions for you. Firstly, how do you see Kenya balancing its relations with Western allies, Gulf states, and China in the regional context? And secondly, in terms of infrastructure, security, and regional diplomacy, where do you see Kenya positioning itself within the broader strategies for the Horn? Yeah, thank you. Floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much. The second question is a bit technical, but I'll try and answer. First of all, I would like to say the Horn of Africa is a center for international relations. Why do I say it's a center for international relations? If you look at the red part of the map there, these communities, the communities in the Horn of Africa, that is Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, northern Uganda, Sudan, these are pastoralist communities, pastoral communities. They travel long distance feeding their animals. And when the Westphalian state concept came to Africa, these communities were, they faced difficulties because security, that is foreign policy and domestic security, block them from traveling freely. So this brings conflicts. But of course, we have the states as we are today. Kenya is indeed an international hub because if you look at Nairobi, Nairobi serves as a very critical part for the UN offices.
There's a lot of embassies in Nairobi. And Kenya indeed serves as the hub for international actors coming to Kenya and making decisions. So you see, you look at Nairobi not only as a western part, but you find there's a lot of embassies there. There's a lot of negotiations going on in Nairobi. But one of the interesting parts about Kenya is that before I just even talk about Kenya, I want us to understand the Horn of Africa in terms, I'm a political scientist, so I tend to unpack the Horn in terms of international relations. And a very good explanation to the Horn is the realist perspective, which, of course, the realist explains the structure of the international system, how these different countries in the Horn behave. But there's something the realist perspective don't explain, which is the concept of imagined communities. These communities in the Horn are diverse in terms of tribes, in terms of cultures, and they are very important when it comes to security and foreign policy. Another thing in Africa is that you cannot just explain foreign policy in terms of the institutions. You have to understand foreign policy in Africa with the individual foreign policy maker. What do I mean by saying this? I look at the Horn of Africa in terms of ontological security. My brother here is a realist. He looks at this, the rational actor of the state, which is, of course, it's explained the state. But the state also, if we look at the state as the rational actor, we are missing something out, because the individual foreign policy decision maker in the Horn of Africa is very important. And I'll unpack this as I go on, giving an explanation of, for example, the president of Kenya, his decisions, and also his relation in the Horn of Africa. So the state, when I talk of ontological security, I mean the self-security, the security of the self, individual maker, the security, how the individual foreign policy maker view himself with others. A very good example is the relationship between Kenya and Sudan when the war broke out. In 2023, Kenya invited Hermeti, the leader of Rapid RSF in State House. And that does not sit well with Sudan. And Kenya, if you look at the relationship between Kenya and Sudan, there's a very big tension between these two countries. Sudan is going through a very complex war conflict, and it doesn't matter whichever side wins, because it doesn't mean that there will be peace in Sudan. And Kenya is, as a diplomatic hub, there's a lot of negotiations from Sudan going on in Kenya. And the fact that Hermeti comes to State House and is invited for a meeting does not sit well with the Sudan army leader. So these are the dynamics I'm talking about. The individual foreign policy maker is it's very important. Another thing is that the Horn of Africa now, in 2017, there has been a shift of liberal hegemony to different actors starting gaining power and coming to have relationship in the Horn of Africa. The American dominant, a lot of political scientists will agree with me that the American dominant started diminishing in 2017. So the liberal hegemony started going down. Different actors started coming to the Horn of Africa. And Kenya has been calculating this strategy. Even though they're not quite, they're trying to calculate their mistakes, of course, A very good example is 2022, when President Ruto went into power. Between 2002 and 2025 February, Kenyan president has had 33 meetings with the Western partners, traveling in the US several times, traveling to Germany, traveling to the UK and other Western partners, 33 times. But then there's a shift in 2025. When Donald Trump comes into power, you see President Ruto starting to go to China, trying to have a relationship with China, strengthening its relationship with other middle powers, such as the UAE, Qatar, Turkey. So there's a balance of play here. How that play will turn out, it's very interesting to study. Another interesting part is when you see these middle powers, such as Turkey. Turkey has a very good relationship with Somalia. And Turkey has a different relationship with Kenya. Number one, with Somali, Turkey has a military, or rather security kind of agreement with Somalia. Turkey is in Mogadishu. Right now, Turkey has about 500 troops trying to help the Somalian government. They've trained about more than 5,000 Somali troops. Kenya is in Somalia as well, in the southern part. That is Kismayo, under the African Union Support and Stabilization Mission. So the relationship with Kenya and Somalia, and Turkey and Somalia, is very important to understand, to look at what really is the interest in this area. Turkey and Somalia has a very good relationship in the sense that Turkey has a very strong Muslim culture. Somalia has a strong Muslim culture. Then Turkey has an open foreign policy, which is, let's try and see, more pragmatic. And therefore, the pragmatism, let's see what will happen. It's very interesting compared to the Western world, how the Western world related with Somalia before. There was more conditionality when it comes to the relationship, security with Somalia. Turkey comes in and say, let's try and see what will happen. And my brother here just mentioned the relationship between Turkey and Erdogan trying to mediate between Somali and Ethiopia. And also, Turkey's influence in Rwanda and Burundi, Rwanda and the DRC. These are just pragmatic way of foreign policy, which we have to look at what is the outcome. We have to try to understand how the outcome will be compared to the West. The West now, if you look at even not just the Horn of Africa, but the western part of Africa, the West are trying to withdraw, and then new actors are coming in. And this is a very interesting part because, number one, Ethiopia is trying to have, as he said, has an ambition to have an international waters. Ethiopia is a landlocked country with a very strong navy. They had an agreement with, in 2021, Abiy and Putin, Russia had an agreement to train the Ethiopian navy. Russia is in the Red Sea. This region is very important when it comes to international trade. I was just talking to my Somali counterpart. We were just making a joke that if Somali become very powerful tomorrow, very stable and powerful tomorrow, the international waters of Kenya will not be very important. Because Somali has a very long sea. So if they are stable tomorrow, it doesn't sit well with the Kenyans. It's a debate for another day. But indeed, we need to look at the foreign policies of the Horn of African countries, not only as a rational state actors, but how different states relate with one another through the individual foreign policy maker and also the communities. Kenya has a very big major Somali communities. And we were just discussing maybe a Somali community should be a Kenyan president, and we see how it goes. Because these Somali communities in Kenya, they are very strong economically, they are in power in Kenya, and if you try to understand, for example, Kenya's foreign policy towards Somalia, you cannot just understand that through the state making a decision to go and fight in Somali. You have to understand Kenya's foreign policy from 2011 to go and fight Al-Shabaab in terms of the individual foreign policy maker and the relationship with those individuals and different Somali clans. So therefore, the African, or rather the Horn of African setup, it's very complex in the sense that you have to understand it, not only in terms of the institutions. A very interesting part also is President Ruto of Kenya has a very strong relationship with the Oromo communities. The Oromo communities are a community in northern Kenya, and they are a very strong community which is related to President Abiy. You have to understand the dynamics of how these communities are relating with President Ruto, and how does it sit in Ethiopia. So, but if you just take the foreign policy institution, you are going to miss a big part. And therefore, indeed, Kenya is a strong international hub. Kenya and Turkey has a very strong, has a very good relation, and most of this relation is in terms of economic. If you walk in the Kenyan streets today, many Kenyan communities, they like to buy Turkish clothes, Turkish cloth line. So there's a lot of community, fashion, Turkish fashion is very popular in Kenya. But then when you go to the foreign policy part, there are differences in terms of yes, if you go to the foreign policy part, Kenya has a more economical relationship with Turkey. Somalia has a more military kind of relationship. Turkey is helping Somalia a lot. Turkey has supported different Islamic schools in Somalia as different projects, and it's working very well. The question we should ask ourselves, okay, how will this relationship last? When? And we hope for a better relationship, because currently Turkey is playing the Turkey relationship with Somalia, the Turkish troop in Mogadishu is really doing well. But a question...
Dr. Cliff, last 1 minute.
Yes. The question I might want to leave us with, the armed group in Somalia, Al-Shabaab, they saw what happened in Afghanistan. They saw what happened in Syria. And they are reading, they're learning. So the question is, if the Kenyan troops get out of Somalia tomorrow, and Turkey is out of Somalia tomorrow, will Somalia take care of itself? A question we should ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those reflections on Kenya, Dr. Cliff. Finally, I would like to turn to Türkiye. Türkiye is a country that has become increasingly visible in the Horn. especially through its close partnership with Somalia and more recently its engagement with Ethiopia. From this perspective, I would like to ask two main questions, Professor Elem Eğrice Tepecikdoğlu. Firstly, how do you evaluate Turkey's unique role compared to Western and maybe Gulf powers? And secondly, would you say Turkey acts more as a security partner, an economic investor, or a diplomatic mediator in the Horn of Africa? Floor is yours, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Hocam. So allow me to start by thanking you for this very kind invitation. I'm really happy to be part of this panel along with our esteemed guests from the Horn and in the wider region. So while those are both very important and relevant questions, but I have to admit that they are not easy to answer. But I'll do my best, and I'll try to do it within, like, let's say 10 to 15 minutes. So if you allow me, I will not define Turkey as an external country, as with the other countries that we have discussed so far. I don't think it would be fair to put Turkey in the same camp with the other countries that we have discussed. So this is not me talking as a Turkish student, having highly sensitive and highly, let's say, nationalist sentiments, but this is me talking as an academic, and I'll try to explain why I say what I say, because I'm not an historian, but the experts trace Turkey's engagement in the region back to the 16th century. So this is why I think we should not define Turkey as an external country, as with the others we have defined so far, and as a newcomer or as a stranger, because these historical relations, these historical ties, along with religious and cultural proximity, provides Turkey a leverage in its relations with the regional countries. But let's go one by one and focus on Turkey's relations with the individual Horn of African countries, and then I think we'll have a better understanding about Turkey's engagement in the Horn in general. So, of course, we should, I think, start with Somalia. We know that relations go before the 2011, but this date is a milestone in bilateral relations, because relations actually accelerated following President Erdogan's first visit to the country under his tenure as the prime minister. So following this visit, well, this visit actually defined the image of Mogadishu as a no-go zone, as a dangerous zone. And after this visit, Turkey started its largest humanitarian campaign. Not only with public institutions, but the NGOs were also involved in this campaign. And Turkey held 2 conferences to bring Somalia back to the attention of the international community. And Somalian students also, they were allocated a special quota after this first visit. So this explains why the number of Somalian students are that high right now. I think a few years ago, their numbers exceeded 10,000, but now when I checked the latest data, I saw that it's about 7,000, still an impressive number. And a year after this symbolic visit, it was symbolic because Erdogan brought his family with him. Not only the businessmen or NGOs were joined this visit, he brought his visit, and this was very symbolic, saying, look, if it was that dangerous, I wouldn't bring my family with me. So this actually, I think, helped the image of the country, which was followed by the direct flights of Turkish Airlines a year later, which was also important. And I think it was during Erdogan's third visit to the country in 2016, Turkey opened its largest embassy in Mogadishu. And a year later, sorry, I tend to say Turkey, but yes, Turkey opened its largest military training facility, again in Mogadishu, a year later. That it's not a base, I would say it's a training academy or facility or a camp, but I wouldn't define it as a military base in the classical sense. So Somalia quickly emerged as one of the largest recipients of Turkish official development assistance, and it remains like that so far. So, and it Turkey became one of the largest trade partners of the country. Now it comes after China and India, the third after those countries. And it is also one of the largest investors in the country. So it has invested in the infrastructure of the war-torn country. And as for the soft power tools, I know that Turkish TV series are very popular in all Horn of African and East African countries. And this is why I have seen that Istanbul is a very popular name. So people tend to name their daughters Istanbul as they tend to name their sons Erdogan. So those soft power tools also matter in addition to Turkey's security cooperation, humanitarian aid activities, and economic ties. But yes, understandably, we focus on Turkey's relations with Somalia, but Turkey's relations with Ethiopia are more established because it goes back to the early 1920s, because when the Turkish Republic gained its independence, there were only a few independent African countries, with Ethiopia being among one of them, and Turkey established its first embassy in sub-Saharan Africa in Addis Ababa in 1926, which marks a relatively early diplomatic presence across the continent. And President Erdogan, again under his tenure as the prime minister, visited Ethiopia together with South Africa in 2005 after the Turkish government declared the year as the Year of Africa. And this was the first bilateral visit by a Turkish prime minister to sub-Saharan Africa. And the first program coordination office of TICA, Turkey's official aid agency, was again established in Addis Ababa. And Addis Ababa was the first route of Turkish Airlines to a sub-Saharan African country. So this is why we see why Somalia, along with Ethiopia, are important partners for Turkey in the Horn. And until very recently, half of Turkish investments in sub-Saharan Africa was in Ethiopia. And again, one of the first economic cooperation agreements of Turkey signed with African countries is with Ethiopia, and all the first business councils Turkey's Foreign Relations Board of Turkey, responsible from coordinating the activities of Turkish private sector. It was again in Addis Ababa. So you see how Ethiopia is important for Turkey's engagement in the Horn. And there's a special TV channel, Kana TV, that broadcasts Turkish TV series. And when we were in Addis Ababa last year, so everyone approached us when they learned that we are from Turkey, asking the Turkish TV series and how they are popular. And one of them even said that, yes, my wife will divorce me because or I will divorce her because we watch Turkish TV series all day long. We sometimes forget to prepare dinner. So I was ashamed to say that I could not watch any of those episodes because I know one episode lasts 3 hours, but I'll compensate that. Yes, and the relations actually enhanced to include security cooperation. I will be talking about it later on. But there are other Horn of African countries, of course, Djibouti and Eritrea, and Turkey's relations with those, let's say, smaller Horn of African countries are also without any controversies or problems. Turkish Airlines flies to both capitals. Turkey has embassies in both countries. And after we discussed the content with Kaan Hocam, I checked the recent data, and I was really surprised to see that Turkey's trade volume with Djibouti exceeded that of Ethiopia. It is even now double of Turkey's trade with Ethiopia, which is very interesting. And the number of students from Djibouti also exceeded the number of students from many African countries. So this is very surprising to see for me. But what I try to mean is that trade relations, diplomatic network, and security cooperation, they go hand by hand. And this actually sets Turkey apart from the other external countries. Why is it the case? Because of the Horn's strategic location, its unique strategic location, being at the intersection of the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden. So whoever controls the Bab al-Mandeb Strait controls much of the trade that goes through the Suez Canal. So it is the shortest trade route that connects Europe with Asia. So, and I know that those interconnectivity debates often focuses on those trade routes by the land, but we know that most of the trade, the world trade, goes through by the sea, by the oceans. Some say that it's 80%, some say 90%. So this explains why the Horn attracts the attention of several global powers. And the natural resources also play a large role in here because it is believed that there are several huge amounts of undiscovered oil and gas reserves, especially across the Somalian coast, and it is believed that they are richer in content. And security, of course, the security of the region have implications on all of us. So it's the center of the maritime routes, it's the center of the global trade, maritime trade, and it's a hub for infrastructure and energy projects. So this explains why there are several countries, as far as I know, there are 7 countries that have military bases in this very small African country of Djibouti, while the United States Camp Lemonnier is the largest US military base in Africa. The China's base close to Camp Lemonnier, it's its first overseas military base. And Japan's base, it's only overseas military base. The Japanese does not define it as a base, but I will define it. So there are other countries, of course, France, Italy, other European countries, and as my colleagues have mentioned, there's Iran, Israel, Russia, all the countries are there, India. So you might ask why Japan is involved, why Japan invests in a military camp in Djibouti, and the answer is simple, I guess. But when we look at Turkey's approach in Somalia, well, it started firstly at the humanitarian domain, and then it expanded to include the economic domain, and then came security cooperation. So I think this is what sets Turkey apart from those countries. So Turkey is a security partner in this sense, but it is also an economic investor, and it's also a mediator. So I would answer your second question, Hocam, as the Turkey is all. So the security partner, not only for Somalia, but shortly after Turkey signed the defense and economic cooperation agreement with Somalia. We often focus on the defense part, but it was also an economic cooperation agreement, and the aim is to provide Somalia to benefit from its maritime sources, because let me give you a striking example. It is believed that Somalia loses an annual loss of $500 million because of the illegal fishing activities of especially China and Iran. So this is an impressive number. And as for Ethiopia, yes, it might seem that the relations primarily focuses on commercial matters, but remember the security cooperation, military cooperation deal signed with Ethiopia in 2021. So as with Djibouti, as I mentioned before, shortly after Turkey signed this agreement with Somalia, Turkey signed a military cooperation agreement with Djibouti in the very same year. And it is reported that the deal also includes financial support and cash aid. And Turkey's engagement also includes mediation efforts. So as Kadir Hocam mentioned in his opening remarks, I can say that Turkey follows a comprehensive strategy, a balanced one that combines mediation efforts, security cooperation, trade relations, humanitarian activities, and other soft power tools and strategies as we discuss scholarship and educational opportunities or flight diplomacy, in addition to its diplomatic network across the region. And then came, as my last words, then came the energy cooperation, which is new, but I expect it to enhance further in the following years because Turkey signed 2 energy cooperation deals with Somalia, and as part of those agreements, Turkey's seismic research vessel, ORSAM, arrived at the coast of Somalia, and President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud inaugurated a welcoming ceremony. And allow me to end my speech with his words. He described the day as a historic day for Somalia, saying that Somalia has never had a better opportunity than the one we have today. So those are his words, not mine. And I think this explains pretty much how Turkey differs from the other countries that we described so far. Thank you, Hocam.
Thank you very much, Professor Elem Hoca. We have now heard perspectives from Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Turkey, which together highlight the complexity and interconnectedness of the Horn of Africa. At this point, I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. We have around 20 minutes for question and answer session. So I kindly ask you to keep your questions brief and, if possible, direct them to a specific speaker. This will allow us to hear more voices and ensure a lively exchange. Yeah. Who would you like to begin? Yeah. Dr. Saad.
So good morning, all of the audience and the panelists. First of all, I would like to thank with ORSAM for organizing such kind of an important discussion about one of very strategic and volatile and vital region in Africa, which is in Horn of Africa. Before my comment, I have one comment which I want to tell all the audience. I am from Somaliland. So whether you like it or not, Somaliland is real. And Somaliland will get recognized very soon. So there, can I have 3 questions, if you allow me, with the 3 panelists? Okay. So the first question is with Dr. Abdul Wahab. Before my question, I want to make some corrections with your presentation. Somaliland's case is not sectionist. Somaliland case is self-reclaiming what we have before. As you know, Somaliland was a British colony, and Italy and Somalia was Italy colony. We unite to create what we call Greater Somalia. And again, we get our right, and still we are searching what we have. So Somaliland is a very different case with South Sudan or Eritrea. Somaliland have its own borders in the colonial time. So my question is, as you know, one of the principles of African Union is what they call theoretical integrity. So Somaliland border is the only one that is embarked in the colonial time. Even the border between Somalia and Somaliland is not marked internationally, but the border between Somaliland and Ethiopia is marked internationally. So my question is, as you can see, and also in your presentation, you say there is no any superpower who have more interest in Somaliland. So currently what's going on, the Trump administration is an example that the United States have an interest in Somaliland. So other things, do you think that the only challenge with Somaliland recognition is only the legal? So that's my question. My second question is going with my colleague from Ethiopia. As you all of you know, at the beginning of the last year, 2024, there's an agreement between Somaliland and Ethiopia, memorandum of understanding, signing with the former president of Somaliland, Musa Bihi, and the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. That became one of the most hottest geopolitical issues in the Horn of Africa. And finally, as the former president of Somaliland publicly say that Somaliland was fulfilling all the criteria to fulfill this agreement, but the Ethiopian side, the pressure from Somalia, delay the agreement. So I asked my question, do you agree that diplomatically, Ethiopia, one of the very Asian countries, was defeated as Somalia, where many people, they call a failed state? So, and finally, my question is with Ms. Allen from Turkey. As you know, Turkey is present in Horn of Africa, but mostly the Turkey influence is only shown in Somalia. For example, Turkey has its largest military base in Somalia. Turkey has its largest embassy in Somalia. Turkey have a relation, maybe have an agreement with oil and other mineral resources in Somalia. Turkey have managing the Mogadishu airport. Turkey is managing the port of Mogadishu. So my question is, does the presence of Turkey is only to benefit the fragility and weak of governance in Somalia to take advantage for Turkey, or the Turkey presence in Horn of Africa is to compete with other rival regional powers in the Gulf or internationally with the United States? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the question. Let's go back the history a little bit. When Somalia attained independence from both British and Italian colony, and both regions united and formed Somali Republic. At the time, Somaliland, British Somaliland, or northern region of Somalia, and the first flag they raised was the blue one. They don't have any other national anthem. The flag they raised was the blue one. That time, the region has no constitution. It's only 30 members of the parliamentarian from the north and 90 members from the south united and formed Somali parliament. And the first constitution was drafted in 1961, voted by the all Somalis. Referendum was conducted from Rais Kamboni, Ethiopian and Kenyan border, all the way to the Zaila. So the issue of when the British left Somaliland, the notion was Somalia at that time was trustship, Indian trustship. The reason was to unite the rest of the country and form the Somali Republic. That's exactly the situation of 1960. The country, Somaliland, has no constitution that time. Somaliland has no flag apart from the first flag they raised on 26th of June, 1960 was the blue one. And everybody knows that. Secondly, majority of Somaliland are pro-unionist. If they have any grievances towards the military regime of Barre during the early 1980s, similar atrocity was done recently in Las Anod. The same thing. What's the difference between Las Anod incident and the Ambro incident of 1998? No different at all. So, Somalis are one tribe, one nation, one flag, one republic, and united by common cause. What I have done, I discover the issue of Somaliland is pushing by foreigners, not even the Somalis themselves. Let's be honest to one another. What we're discussing academically, not the politician. I'm not a politician, by the way. I have nothing to do with politics. The people who are pushing the Somalian recognition are Israelis, UAE, some members of the British, and also some former diplomatic, members of US. They have their own interests, of course. The formation of northeast state of Somalia recently has really undermined the aspiration of the Somaliland itself. That's one issue. So these people are one nation, united by their own common cause. That's, I think, enough, more than enough. Let me go back to the issue of the access to the sea. My colleague here, in fact, he was just, always, saying, Ethiopia, they want access to the sea. Let me clarify the issue. In honest manner, in academic manner. In Africa, there is a 16 landlocked country in Africa. Among them is Ethiopia. No one is not denying Ethiopia to access the sea for commercial purpose. As we speak right now, in Kenya, for instance, Lamu, they have a shareholders, 30% almost. In early 1990s, when Eritrea gained independence from Ethiopia, Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea and Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, they came to Asmara. In fact, he proposed to have an access to ASAP for commercial purpose with almost lower than the rate of Djibouti. He never accepted that one. Reason known to them. Secondly, the Djibouti head of state proposed to Jorra, come to Jorra, open what you call the base here, sorry, the commercial purpose, much easier than, the Djibouti ones are very congested. I don't know why Dr. Abiy, our prime minister, our good prime minister, refused. I don't know. If today I'm prime minister of Ethiopia, I will grab that opportunity. Again, in Berbera, they have a terminal, the whole terminal for Ethiopians. No one cannot refuse them. In Mogadishu, in Kismayo, all the way to Kenya, no one is not refusing to access Ethiopia to the sea. But the question is, what kind of access are they want? What kind of access they are advocating for? That's a question I'm going to ask my colleagues from Ethiopia. They want a military base, basically. They want a military base, they want to control, they want to annex, at least, to have some, autonomy not autonomy, to have it. That, I can tell you, will undermine the stability and the peaceful coexistence of the region. That you can take it to the bank. When we are discussing academically, not political, honestly speaking. I'm not the politician. But that will undermine the stability and coexistence of the Horn of Africa region. So my brothers, welcome to the sea. Welcome to the sea for commercial purpose, not for military purpose. I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for an academic guarantee of access to the sea, not political guarantee. Yeah, you see how the Horn of Africa debate is here in the stage also for partners. You see how we have narrating history. Yeah, I agree with my friend from Nairobi. At the same time, Professor, we have to see the ontological security, but I defined on the leaderships from the state perspective. So those leaders who have a vision, grand vision, and intellectual honesty and self-master have a vision to bring uplifting the state's aspiration to the future that every state is struggling to do. But very simple, clear, to make clear, I'm not a politician officially, but I work around. I mean, as a think tank, which working on foreign policy and diplomacy. And following the last 4 years, and I'm a director of the African department for the last 2 years, and I know this access to the sea issue in detail. And actually, I'm the person who is making the first brief for all international diplomats and ambassadors, calling back to home about the access to the sea. And one of my recommendations at that time is, let's follow a wait and see strategy, rather than having that 1 month of recognition and other issues, because that have its own backlash of diplomatic challenges in the Horn of Africa. But very simple and clear, Ethiopia do not want to access to the sea. It wants to presence in the sea. Very simple logic for more debates. A presence in the sea and access to the sea is very different. We are accessing through Djibouti, yeah, for commercial presence. But Ethiopia as a state, as a big state, and the world largest and only populous country in the world to be landlocked, having historically in the sea, having a big impact even in the sea, being even landlocked. Around the sea, we provide security for the Horn of Africa. We're there, even for the global community, on peacekeeping and peace support. From South Korea to South Sudan, to the current state. Now even Somalia for the last 30 years. So the Horn of Africa status and the globe admits that Ethiopia have such kind of capacity on providing security for international terrorism, against piracy, against crime across the sea. So, and Ethiopia is building and built even its headquarters for the naval base last weeks officially. So we already prepared the naval bases. We thought we will have a presence in the sea in the future. That's a grand vision. Despite our grand vision emanated from the two waters, the Nile and the sea, Arid Sea, the two water strategy. We have a grand two water strategies, which is Nile. We accomplished building a Nile, and we are still partnering in making negotiation and discussion with our friends in Egypt and Sudan. But we are still building a dam, the biggest dam in Africa, that Africans should have to be proud as global South can work alone, even despite international pressures and global suffocations. So a very simple solution is in the Horn of Africa that I think Somalis will understand, Eritrean will understand, and Djibouti will understand, and they are cooperating and they are discussing at official level in my simple assessment as academic from outside, that they have a deal on this presence in the sea for naval base and other issues. Because there is a paradox of geography in the Horn of Africa. Like a professor said, there are Japans who are in Djibouti. There are Americans in Djibouti who have a naval base, a force, more than 4,000 kilometers far from the Horn of Africa. We are almost 60 kilometers far from the sea, territorially. We are near and proximate, but functionally we are distant. So we wanted to reverse that strategic constraints into strategical autonomy. That the Ethiopians have a plan to have access to the sea for common regional issues, not a private interests for Ethiopia. And our foreign policy, as I'm a student of political science and foreign policy advisor, we followed a neighborhood first foreign policy. Our neighbors first, that we give priority for the Horn of Africa. And that's why we do not want to go to a full-blown conflict with Somalia. Despite all the MOUs and other, it's not about defeat and win. That's to reflect on such question. It's not about winning and defeating. It's about diplomatic maneuvering, how to balance things positively in a good manner, that the region should not be destabilized, because we will be benefited when the region was stabilizing. And we sell electricity for Sudan, we sell electricity for Kenya, Tanzania, Djibouti, because we built the great Ethiopian nation Sudan. We are making a lot of economic integration in the region, going to go to Tanzania, South Africa even in the future. After we completed, there are coming dams, big dams, 3-4 dams within months or years, following this greater Ethiopian nation dam is completed. So we are focusing on regional integration. So we also we are discussing with Somaliland. Ethiopia is different when it comes to Somalia. We work with Somalia in a good way, and we trade Somalia. And one of our import-exports in Somalia we are a good partner. At the same time, we work with Somaliland. That's a fact, yeah? This side knows, and those Somalis knows, actually. We have a consular, we have an ambassador there in Somaliland. So we left an vocabulary of recognition, but in practice, we have some dealing on the ground. But at the same time, we have to balance that. We have to recognize that Somalia should be stable and strong state in the Horn of Africa, unlike my Kenyan brother. we need that a normal state should be there in the Horn of Africa. We do not want to disintegrate Sudan. We do not want to disintegrate, because that's a security burden for the Horn of Africa, even sometimes a security burden for Ethiopia because of terrorism, because of other issues. So we have to define that Ethiopia is defined in the Horn of Africa have more to cooperate and to work together. And we work for that. And we have question of access and presence in the sea, because we have, if you talk about access to the sea, we are accessing through Djibouti. But we need to more diversify that routes at the same time, our presence in the sea. That's very clear for the audience and for professors too, I think. Very clear, very simple, that Ethiopia needs a presence in the sea. But that should be achieved and will be achieved through negotiation, bargaining, and mediation. Maybe with the help of Turkish, as you have a mediation department in your foreign ministry. That is the first unique characteristic of Turkish. You have a mediation director general in Turkish foreign ministry, which is not known in other foreign departments arrangements. So those mediation, mediation also a part of this. It's not denying about Ethiopia's sea access. It's already recognizing it. So we get a recognition, a global recognition, and that is a very important thing. So when it comes to Turkey, I advise ORSAM or other think tanks in Turkey. I wanted you have to investigate, have a conduct full length research in the Horn of Africa, in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Sudan, or the perception of your investment in the local societies and official levels. You have to look at how, you have a lot of investments, and there is always many ODA in the Turkish to Horn of Africa, but you have to assess the perceptions by local people, by officials, and by different individuals. Why it's different from Somalia to Ethiopia and Sudan. So there will be some misinterpretation or misunderstanding, especially from this religious dimension when it comes to Ethiopia, some other issues when it comes to extremism and other. You have to assess that as an advice that what are, but we appreciate that the Turkish role in peace building it sometimes shows neutrality. So Ethiopia was questioning the Turkish government to mediate the Ankara tension that get relief to the Horn of Africa actually, because that comes because Turkey is the most trusted country by both countries, by Somalis, at the same time Ethiopia. So trust is very important in international mediations. So if there is no trust, that's going to like Sudan. So the Sudanese fighters have no any trust on UAE, have no any trust on Saudi, have no any trust in US. Still the conflict is going. So maybe Turkey should have to also follow the same path into Sudan. I advise that how to mediate this conflict and contribute to the regional stability, than free from, those tensions have an internal interests in Sudan, for example. If Ethiopia is going, they align with some agencies. If Egypt is going, it's categorized as SAF supporter. If Ethiopia goes have an issue with RSF, some people's claim, despite there is no any evidence that shows Ethiopia was partner. The same Kenya was aligned with, it says, claims with RSF and all those official discussions. Saudi is the same with SAF. UAE is with RSF. So there is no neutral external actors when it comes to Sudan. So there should be a neutral actor like acting as Turkey or other countries from European who have less interest to the internal politics and be regional stability factors like the mediation between Ethiopia and Somalia. So the issue that it's not about defeating and winning, it's about diplomatic management, diplomatic maneuvering, how we settle the issue of presence in the sea at the regional level should be solved regionally with diplomatic and manner rather than forces, rather than fighting, because the Horn of Africa is tired of war. We have our own internal issues. The Somali have internal issues. Ethiopia have the capacity to mobilize its internal citizens when it comes to war, as you see in history, but we do not want to go to that far because we have the right legal capacity, historical rights, legal rights, and current geopolitical dynamics that Ethiopia have a leverage to access our presence in the sea through the diplomatic ways in communication with our partner, with Somalia or Somaliland or Eritrea. Thank you.
Well, now that it has been a tradition, allow me to start by saying that I'm an academic, not a politician. But during my talk, I try to emphasize how Turkey has relations with all Horn of African countries, with all independent Horn of African countries, not only with Somalia or Ethiopia. But apparently I wasn't that successful, let's say. Here I quote, you said, if Turkey tries to benefit from the weak governance and fragility of Somalia. I'm not sure if it is the case. I mean, what's in it to benefit from the fragility of a country? If it was the case, I mentioned that Turkey has started its largest humanitarian campaign because there was a humanitarian crisis going on in the country. As you remember, following his first visit to the country, President Erdogan made a speech, a seminal speech at the UN, saying that as the international community, we have failed Somalia, and we don't even have a right to sleep, have a right to eat when our Somalian brothers and sisters are suffering. So this was a call, and this was at a time when most of the external powers or NGOs left the country. They were having their operations from Nairobi, those NGOs. So what's in it to compete? There was nothing to compete with other countries because there was barely anyone in the country, unfortunately. So this is why Turkish Airlines started direct flights to Mogadishu. You might ask if it is profitable or not, but it was a way to connect the country with the world. It was a way to connect the airport with the rest of the country. So, and if it was the case, I think if Turkey was trying to benefit from the fragility of the country, how would we explain the mediation efforts, for example? How can we explain the security cooperation, the humanitarian efforts, and mediation efforts? So what's in it for Turkey to benefit from such a mediation activity? And if you had followed the mediation talks, there were 3 rounds of talks. There was an emphasis on international law and Somalia's unity, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. This is the official stance. Turkey supports Somalia's unity, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. And there was also an emphasis on the international law, as Somalian side also emphasized, because as an academic, I'm well aware of the fact that the landlocked states have a right, they should have a right to have an access to and access from the sea. So this is why both the Turkish side and Somalia side emphasize the international law, because the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, it stipulates that the landlocked countries should have a right to the sea and from the sea. So, and we can explain it from the politics going back to the colonial period. Professor mentioned that Africa has 16 landlocked states. So Africa has the most landlocked states than any other continent. So unfortunately, as a consequence of the colonialism, but they have a right to have an access to them from the sea, but this should be in line with an agreement with the source state. So this is why Turkey emphasizes international law and Somalia's sovereignty, and this is why it emphasized those 2 factors during the mediation talks. And this doesn't only include Ethiopia and Somalia, by the way. You know, Turkey is co-launched Mediation for Peace initiative together with Finland in 2010. So because Turkey acts as a responsible member of the international community, and if it is a purpose, a hidden or secret purpose in, for example, or having high interest that we do not follow as academics in the Horn. So how can we explain its mediation efforts in South Philippines or in Bosnia and Herzegovina? So those things matter, I guess. So this is why I wouldn't define it as a pragmatic foreign policy, but I would define it as a foreign policy based on humanitarian concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Okay, actually our time is up, but we can take one question. Maybe you can mix it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a comment on one of the issues, and the other is a question. Professor Abdul Wahab, I know from the experience that the smartest politician is the one who says, I am not politician. First, on the issue of access to the sea, Ethiopia has had historical claim. Even you know, the Habash Eyalet, you know, even historically, the coastal area which Turkey, Ottoman Turkish rule reached was called Habash Eyalet, that is related to Ethiopia. Even it shows how we were in the we were in the coast. It was rather, the professor said that colonialism or other actors, foreign actors, were involved in destabilizing Somalia. But I can say that Ethiopia's loss of access to the sea was a colonial project itself. It's not Ethiopia's demand to access to the sea that is a colonial. Ethiopia lost for the first time because of Italian invasion of part of Ethiopia, which is called now Eritrea. And also, yes, in 1991, because of our fault, our leaders mistakenly recognized Eritrea despite Ethiopians' opposition to lose Eritrea and Asab and Massawa, which is historically can be proven. Therefore, we are to ask for our historical right to access to the sea, not for the purpose of trade. It should be seen. The Japanese, the Americans, everyone is coming to establish its own navy on the Horn of Africa, but Ethiopia is denied to have this access right, this presence of military army base in the Horn of Africa. It cannot, you know, the sustainability is almost zero. Therefore, with these all 130 million people, we cannot stay away from Red Sea. This should be clear. And that is what we want. We don't want any aggression. We want our friends to understand that. We want our neighbors to understand that. But denying Ethiopia's access to the sea on the basis of historical claims is something unfair. This is what I have to comment on. The other comment is also, the other question is for Professor, especially, I know that the Turkish scholarship is invested more on Djibouti, which is 500,000 people, compared to Ethiopia, which is 130 million people. Do you think that it is fair to give Ethiopia this much less proportion scholarship than Somalia or other countries? And I think I was talking with my Turkish friends that it is unfair, and I think you have to comment on that, and the Turkish institutions also should consider this is unfair, and that is my question and comment. Thank you very much.
Maybe there was a confusion, Hocam. Can I explain it? We met in Ethiopia, by the way. Do you remember? Yes. Okay, so there is no quota to Ethiopians, to Djibouti, or even Somalian students. It was following President Erdogan's first visit that the president gave an order to the Ministry of Education saying that Somalian students should have a special quota because there is this humanitarian crisis. But now there is no special quota to any African students or any country. But those students, the numbers that I have given you, is the students that are not that do not benefit from Turkish scholarships, Türkiye scholarships. Sorry, of YTB, Turkish Presidency for Turks Abroad and Related Communities. They have a special scholarship program. But those students, most of them, they are self-funded. So Ethiopian students, it simply means that they do not prefer Turkey as with the Djiboutian students. So this simply says that this is not a special quota. They do not have more scholarships than Somalian students. There is no quota, by the way. The YTB, they have their own fieldwork, they have their interviews, they go to those countries, and then they have a very good system. We have the best students. I mean, if there's a student not only from an African country, which is very successful in courses, an international student, we would always say that, of course, she or he has a scholarship from YTB. But there's no special quota, not anymore. Maybe it was only for a few years, but maybe the Ethiopians should show more interest in having their educations in Turkish universities. Thank you.
Let me say a few comments. Dr. Azrat, my dear brother, Dr. Ibrahim, let me be honest with you. You know, Ethiopia controlling from river to the sea is a dream. Honestly, let me be honest with you. From controlling from river to the sea. Eritrea, early 1940s, early 1930s, was the most developed nation after South Africa. Italians, they built Eritrea, and also that time Eritrea was second in the continent after South Africa. When the British came to Eritrea, he dismantled Eritrea. He dismantled what they call the service sector, industry sector, agriculture sector, all sectors of development he destroyed until Eritrea went back to a stone stage. That's one issue. Secondly, I told you many times, no one cannot deny Ethiopia to access the sea for commercial purposes. No one cannot deny. The issue of the referendum of 1993 by Eritrea and Ethiopia, obviously, the Meles Zenawi, the former prime minister, allowed them to proceed to become independent state with what they call the, you know, and the UN and the African Union. Also, they allowed. So now reclaiming again, I think that one can create a tension. I can take that, take it from, you can take it to the bank. It will create a new tension. 120 million Ethiopians, they have a right to access the sea, I'll tell you. No one cannot deny that one. But you know, comparing Djibouti has a lot of military bases. Also, we have a military base there. That's a lame excuse. One of the issues in Djibouti, they have a military bases. Why Djibouti, they sign an agreement with France. They escape from Ethiopia, so that at least they are going to protect themselves. That's a fact. And again, for commercial purpose, they attracted the US, China, Japan, just 12 nations, at least to generate some income. That's for commercial purpose. The issue is the issue of Ethiopia has a right to access the sea in peaceful manner. We're tired about war. We want a peace. Day before yesterday, there's a tension between Somalia and Ethiopia. Today, there's tension between Eritrea and Ethiopia. So tension after tension. We cannot continue this kind of things. We need life. We brothers, you can go and take, you know, some commodities from Mogadishu port. Well, no one cannot die for that. But having a military base, Somalia has the longest coastal area in Africa. Very friendly society. 10 million of Somalis are in Ethiopia, right or wrong. Somali state in Ethiopia is one of the largest state in Ethiopia. And I don't think so today Somali can be a prime minister. This is known to you. So before the aspiration of what access to the sea, let's just put our house in order first. Particularly in Ethiopia, which is also the regional power of Horn of Africa. They must put the house in order. Internally, Ethiopia is, you have seen what's going on in Amhara region. You know it better than me what is going on in Tigray region. You know better than me what's going on in the Oromo region. Put your house in order before anything else. Because we tie the tensions. We are brothers, we love you so much. Please stop this kind of rhetoric things. That will not, it will undermine the stability of the region. Can we conclude? You can continue. Thank you so much.
I think Khan will give us a closed session and we'll discuss. I think that's better because the Horn of Africa issue is a big issue. That's why we come here to discuss.
Okay. Yeah, as we have heard today, the Horn of Africa is not only a regional concern, but also a global one, where the interests of major powers intersect with the agency of local states. I would like to sincerely thank you, speakers, for their valuable contributions and the audience for their engagement. We hope today's discussion has provided new perspectives on the current dynamics shaping the Horn of Africa. We hope to gather again in future programs of ORSAM. Thank you.